Home, the one place we're supposed to feel safe. We lock our doors, close our windows, and rest in the comfort of four walls that protect us from the outside world. But what if those walls were not empty? What if, right behind the drywall, someone was watching, waiting, living? For 12 long years, one family in a quiet American suburb went about their lives completely unaware that they were never truly alone. Their house, their sanctuary, had become someone else's home too, and the story of how this came to light is almost too shocking to believe. Tonight, we peel back the plaster, crawl into the hidden crawl spaces, and reveal the chilling truth of the man who lived in their walls. The story begins in the kind of neighborhood you've probably driven through 100 times. Wide streets lined with maple trees, white picket fences, neat lawns, the sound of sprinklers in summer. A place where people wave to each other when they drive by, and crime is something you read about in the next town over, not something that happens here. The house itself was a two-story colonial, built in the late 70s. Beige siding, green shutters, a wooden porch swing that creaked whenever the wind blew. To anyone else, it was ordinary, but inside, it was home to the Wagners, a family of four who had no idea that their lives were about to become the subject of one of the most disturbing home invasion cases in modern memory. James Wagner, the father, a practical man, worked long hours as an electrician, known for his jokes and his deep love for his kids. Mary Wagner, the mother, a stay-at-home parent who filled the house with warmth. She loved baking, sewing, and keeping her family close. Ethan, their son, 12 years old when the story begins. A video game lover, shy, always glued to his headphones. Abigail, Abby the youngest, just 7 at the time. Talkative, full of questions, with an imagination so vivid that even her parents sometimes got lost in her stories. They were an ordinary family, the kind you'd never expect to headline a story like this. And yet, just beyond their walls, literally inches away, another life was unfolding. His name was Charles Dawson. To the world, he was a drifter, a man down on his luck. But to the Wagners, though they didn't know it, he became something far more sinister. Charles had once lived in the same neighborhood, in a house just 2 streets over. But after a string of personal tragedies, a lost job, the death of his parents, and eviction, he slipped through the cracks of society, homeless, forgotten, but still tethered to the place he once called home. That tether would lead him back to the Wagner's house, a place with a forgotten crawl space and just enough access points to vanish into. At first, it was supposed to be temporary. A night here, a safe place from the cold. But one night turned into weeks, then months, and eventually years. It began with things so small that no one questioned them. A granola bar missing from the pantry. A soda can gone from the fridge. James thought Ethan had eaten it late at night. Ethan blamed Abby. Abby swore it wasn't her. Then came the misplaced items. A watch James could have sworn he left on his dresser, now sitting in the laundry room. Mary's favorite sewing scissors were missing for weeks before suddenly reappearing in the garage. Every time they brushed it off, someone forgot. Someone moved it. It was normal, but the strangeness escalated. Abby began waking up in the middle of the night, claiming she heard footsteps in the walls. Not in the hallway, in the walls. She told her mother, "There's a man behind my bed. He's whispering." Mary chalked it up to a nightmare. After all, kids had wild imaginations. But then Ethan started noticing it too. The sound of faint breathing near the air vent above his desk. The smell of cigarette smoke, though no one in the family smoked. The Wagners laughed it off. Old pipes, the house settling, their minds playing tricks. But in truth, their house wasn't settling. It was waking up. The dog was the first to know. Their golden retriever, Max, began barking at the walls at night. Not at the front door, not at shadows outside, at the walls. His nose pressed against the drywall, growling, teeth bared. The Wagners were unnerved but still skeptical. They joked about mice, maybe raccoons in the attic. James even set traps. They caught nothing. And yet, the noises persisted. Scratching, shuffling, the faintest cough echoing through the vents. Then one night, James woke at 3 a.m. to use the bathroom. As he walked down the hall, he froze. A shadow, tall, lean, moved across the wall near Abby's door. He rushed over, flung the door open. Nothing, just his daughter sleeping soundly. But when he glanced back toward the hallway, the attic hatch was slightly open. James brushed it off, told himself it was nothing, but he couldn't shake the chill crawling down his spine. Something wasn't right, and he was about to discover just how wrong things truly were. James told Mary about the attic hatch the next morning. She laughed nervously and said maybe he forgot to close it when he stored the Christmas decorations. But James hadn't touched it in months. That same week, Abby came downstairs with wide eyes. She clutched her teddy bear and said, "Mommy, the man in the vent told me to be quiet." Mary froze. The man in the vent? Abby's words were brushed off as imagination, but Mary couldn't ignore the goosebumps running down her arms. That night, she lay awake in bed. At 2:17 a.m., she heard it. Faint footsteps above her head, moving from one end of the attic to the other. She held her breath, gripping the sheets tight, too afraid to move. She wasn't imagining it. Someone was up there. James decided to check the attic the next morning. With a flashlight in hand, he pushed the hatch open, pulled himself up, and swept the beam across the dusty space. First, nothing. Just insulation, boxes of holiday decorations, and old furniture. But then, near the far corner, he saw something that froze his blood. A pile of food wrappers, crumpled chip bags, empty water bottles, and a single, dirty blanket. James staggered back. He wanted to believe it was an intruder who had snuck in once or twice. But deep down, he knew this wasn't new. This was lived in. He called the police. 2 officers arrived, searched the attic, then the crawl spaces, then the basement. They found nothing. Probably kids sneaking up here, or a homeless guy who got in one night. One officer said, "You're safe. Just lock your doors." The words did little to comfort the Wagners, because if it was just a homeless man, how had he gotten in without breaking a lock or window? And why had they heard footsteps last night when every door was locked tight? The officers left. The Wagners tried to move on, but fear was already burrowing deeper than the man in their walls ever had. Days later, James noticed his wallet had been moved from the nightstand to the kitchen table. Nothing stolen, just moved. Mary's makeup bag appeared on the porch one morning. She swore she left it in the bathroom cabinet. Ethan came home from school to find his game controller sitting on his pillow when he had left it in the living room. Every object seemed to whisper, "I was touched," and then came the smell, a faint, sour odor wafting through the vents. Something human but not familiar. It was the smell of someone who'd been living in the dark too long. James wasn't sleeping anymore. Mary was jittery, jumping at every sound. The children were scared to go upstairs alone. So James bought a small security camera and hid it in the living room. The first night, nothing. The second night, nothing. By the third night, he almost forgot about it, until he reviewed the footage. At 2:46 a.m., the camera captured something horrifying. A man, gaunt, pale, barefoot, slid silently from behind the couch. He crept into the kitchen, opened the fridge, ate cold chicken with his hands, and then disappeared through a narrow gap beside the pantry wall. James dropped the phone in shock. There was no question anymore. Someone had been living inside their home. The only question left was, how long? James called the police again, this time showing them the footage. This wasn't paranoia. This was real. Officers arrived with a team, tearing open the crawl spaces and attic corners. What they discovered was more than just a sleeping spot. They found a hidden nest, a filthy mattress pad, stolen family photos pinned to the wall, a notebook filled with scribbled entries. "They don't know. They never see. This is my house too." And scraps of clothing clearly belonging to the children. It wasn't just a place to sleep. It was a shrine, a life, and the most disturbing part? Police estimated he'd been there for over a decade. Armed with the footage, the police returned to the Wagner home, this time not just to reassure but to act. It was just past midnight when the officers moved in. James stood in the driveway, gripping his children's shoulders, while Mary shook uncontrollably, clutching a blanket around herself. Inside, officers tore into the drywall beside the pantry, the exact spot where the intruder vanished on camera. With crowbars and flashlights, they pried open the wood, pushing deeper and deeper until a pair of eyes reflected back at them. The man blinked against the beam of their lights, gaunt and filthy, his long hair matted, his clothes little more than rags. "Get out! Hands where we can see them!" He resisted for only a moment before crawling forward, his thin frame folding unnaturally to squeeze out of the wall. The smell hit them first, a mix of sweat, mold, and years of living in confinement. He had been hiding there all along, inches away, watching, waiting. His name was confirmed: Charles Dawson, 52 years old, once a local, now a stranger even to himself. Police escorted him out in handcuffs, his lips moving silently, muttering phrases no one could understand. Mary swore she heard him say, "Don't take me from my family." Neighbors gathered outside in shock, phones recording, unable to believe the man who lived among them was pulled from the very walls of the Wagner's home. Inside, investigators began cataloging his hidden world. Behind the pantry wall and up into the attic, Dawson had created a labyrinth of crawl spaces. Bedding, a nest made from stolen blankets and old coats. Food stash, dozens of empty cans, half-eaten granola bars, and spoiled fruit. Personal shrine, photographs of the Wagner children, printed school photos, family Christmas cards, taped carefully to the wood beams. Journal, scraps of notebooks filled with rambling entries like, "I am part of them now. They will never know. This house loves me." Investigators concluded that Dawson had slipped in over a decade earlier, through an unlocked basement hatch, and simply never left. Narrator, chilling pause. For 12 years, the Wagners lived with an uninvited guest, who saw himself not as an intruder, but as family. Under questioning, Dawson revealed his mindset. He said he first entered the home during winter, seeking warmth. He noticed how happy the Wagners were, how full their home felt compared to his empty life. At first, he hid to survive, but soon survival turned into obsession. "They were mine," he told detectives. "I watched them grow. I kept them safe. I belonged there." He admitted he often sat silently behind the drywall during family dinners, listening to conversations. He celebrated birthdays with them in his own way, humming "Happy Birthday" through the vents. But when asked why he never revealed himself, his answer was chilling. They wouldn't understand. Families don't invite the walls to join them at the table. Ethan later told police he often felt like someone was watching him while he played. Abby admitted she heard whispers at night, but thought they were dreams. The realization crushed Mary. For years, her children had been brushed off when they were, in fact, the most attuned to the danger. Sometimes the smallest voices speak the loudest truths. We just don't listen until it's too late. The Wagners never returned to the house. They moved in with relatives and eventually sold it. Neighbors began boarding up crawl spaces, sealing attics, checking basements, all because of one man's silent invasion. Dawson was charged with multiple counts of burglary, trespassing, and stalking, but mental health evaluations complicated the case. Doctors diagnosed him with severe schizophrenia and delusional attachment disorder. Instead of prison, he was committed to a psychiatric facility. For the Wagners, justice felt hollow. Their peace had been stolen, not their possessions. And no sentence could return the 12 years they unknowingly shared their home with a stranger. 12 years, 12 birthdays, Christmas mornings, family dinners, all shadowed by a man in the walls. The story spread like wildfire. Local news stations couldn't get enough of it. Man found living in family's walls for 12 years, and soon it went national. Reporters crowded the neighborhood. Vans lined the street. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains as cameras rolled. For the Wagners, it was suffocating. Their private nightmare had become public spectacle. Strangers speculated online. How could they not know? Were they blind? Were they complicit? But the truth was far darker and far simpler. Dawson had been a master of invisibility. He survived by slipping between shadows, waiting for silence, and never leaving behind enough evidence to prove his existence. The human mind is quick to doubt what it cannot see. And sometimes, what we cannot see is exactly what destroys us. The discovery shook the neighborhood to its core. Families who once left doors unlocked now double-bolted them. Crawl spaces were sealed with cement. Attics were padlocked. Even children refused to sleep in their own rooms, terrified that the wall man was hiding behind the drywall. Neighborhood watch groups sprang up. Strangers on the street were viewed with suspicion. A community built on trust was now a place of paranoia. The Wagners had unintentionally exposed a weakness everyone shared: the illusion of safety. Because once you realize danger can live in your walls, nowhere feels safe again. Investigators began piecing together Dawson's 12 years of hiding. What they found were chilling possibilities that sent shivers through the police department itself. Unseen presence. They estimated Dawson had been within 5 feet of the family nearly every night. Silent witness. He knew their arguments, their secrets, their fears. In many ways, he knew them more intimately than their closest friends. Crossed lines. Evidence suggested he had entered the children's rooms while they slept. Fingerprints were found on Abby's toy chest and Ethan's desk. When asked if Dawson had ever considered harming them, his chilling reply was, "No, hurting them would mean losing them, and I couldn't lose my family again." But then he added something that made even the detectives uneasy. "Besides, sometimes I wanted to keep them forever, even if it meant they had to stay in the walls with me." He said it with a smile. Talk shows debated whether the police had failed the Wagners. Why hadn't they investigated more thoroughly the first time? Could earlier action have saved the family years of living alongside a stranger? What if Dawson had snapped one night? Parents across the country watched the story unfold in horror. Suddenly, every creak of a floorboard and every unexplained draft carried a new weight. The story wasn't just about one family anymore. It was about all of us. About the unsettling truth that we never really know what lies beyond the walls we trust to keep us safe. For James and Mary, the hardest part wasn't the media, the neighbors, or the endless speculation. It was the guilt. Guilt that they hadn't believed their children sooner. Guilt that they ignored the signs. Guilt that, for 12 years, they shared their lives with a man who stole their peace without ever stealing their possessions. Mary told a reporter through tears, "He was with us for every birthday, every Christmas, every family fight. I just didn't know. And now I can't stop wondering, how many of my memories aren't just mine?" She wasn't asking the world. She was asking herself. And no answer would ever make it easier. It takes years to build trust, and one hidden stranger to destroy it. And the most haunting part of all was still to come. Because while the Wagners tried to move on, the man in their walls had one final twist to reveal. Something so unsettling, it would leave investigators speechless. Investigators thought they had seen it all. But when they combed through Dawson's notebooks more carefully, one detail sent chills down their spines. In one entry, dated nearly 10 years earlier, he had written, "She is 7 now. She talks to her dolls at night. She doesn't know I'm listening." And another, years later, Ethan is almost a man. He thinks no one sees him cry when he loses his games. But I do. I see everything. These weren't random scribbles. They were diaries of the children's lives, recorded by someone who should never have been there to witness them. Worse still, police found sketches of the family's bedrooms, drawn with shocking accuracy, including hiding spots, furniture layouts, and notes like, "Vent rattles when she sleeps. Floor creaks near the desk. Best time to move, 2:15 a.m. He hadn't just lived with them, he had studied them. And if circumstances had been only slightly different, this could have ended as more than a haunting story. Could have been a tragedy. To this day, no one knows exactly how many times Dawson came within inches of the Wagners as they slept. Did he ever sit in the corner of a room, watching silently while they dreamed? Did he ever stand over their beds, resisting impulses no one could prove? Did he ever consider crossing a line he claimed he wouldn't? The notebooks offered no clear answers, only hints, only possibilities. Sometimes the scariest monsters aren't the ones who act, but the ones who almost do. The family eventually moved across the state. They changed their names, desperate to escape the whispers and headlines. James struggled with insomnia, often pacing the house at night, double-checking locks again and again. Mary fell into quiet withdrawal. She no longer trusted the comfort of silence. Ethan became fiercely private, refusing to let anyone into his personal space. Abby, the youngest, grew up with therapy sessions and a lingering fear of vents and attics. In interviews years later, James summed it up in one sentence: "We lost more than a house. We lost the idea of home." The case became a cautionary tale. Safety experts used it in seminars. Police referenced it in training manuals. It wasn't just about one man. It was about complacency, about the fragile line between security and illusion. Homeowners across the country began sealing crawl spaces, adding motion detectors, and checking their attics more thoroughly. The story had created a ripple of paranoia, but also of awareness. Awareness is born from fear, but awareness is also what keeps fear from becoming reality. Silence can be peaceful, but silence can also hide monsters. The house where it all happened still stands. New owners live there now. They painted the walls, replaced the floors, and sealed the crawl spaces. But neighbors whisper that, on quiet nights, they still hear creaks and scratches coming from the walls. Of course, it could be the pipes, it could be the wind, or it could be something else. So tonight, when you lay your head down to sleep, ask yourself this: are you truly alone in your home? Or has someone already made your walls their home too?